If the controlling idea is the main point of the topic of the story, it guides the ideas expressed in the story and can help you keep to the point. If your action story is positive, a prescriptive tale, your controlling idea will be something like life is preserved when the protagonist overpowers or outwits the antagonist. If your action story is negative, a cautionary tale, your controlling idea will be something like death results when the protagonist fails to overpower or outwit their antagonist. Conventions of the action genre are the protagonist's role as a hero must be clearly defined throughout the story, this of which is the object of desire being to stop the villain and save the victim. They are heading out on a journey, or they must face an obstacle conscious of the villain. The hero is weaker than the villain. On the other hand, the protagonist can act the role of the victim or turn out to be the villain all this time in some stories due to scarcity. The victim's role should be defined blatantly throughout the novel. The victim needs the hero to protect him from the villain. The victim is less powerful than both the villain and hero. The villain has greater power than the hero and victim. The villain uses their resources to prevent the protagonist and cause harm to the victim. There is speech in praise of the villain. At some point, a character must allude to how the antagonist appears unbeatable. The novel plot is fast-paced with action and thrill throughout the whole story. Characters are situated in extreme situations and coerced to take risks. Hostile scenes of the action genre are the instigated incident is a life-threatening attack by the antagonist of the environment. The attack either is causal or coincidental. Following the attack, the protagonist judges the duty to take action against the protagonist. Coerced to take action after procrastinating the duty to do so, the protagonist acts out. The protagonist finds or gains an understanding of the antagonist's bond. Alternatively, the protagonist develops an understanding of the antagonist's nature or purpose. Having responded to the matter at hand, the beginning strategy of the protagonist fails to know evil against the antagonist. The protagonist befriends coincidentally a new ally. The protagonist faces an all-is-lost moment and comes to the conclusion they must adapt their tactics to subduing or overwhelming the antagonist to salvage some form of triumph over them. The climactic and central event of the action story is the event of the protagonist at the mercy of the antagonist, and the protagonist is left to create a gift to save the victim and themselves as well. In the ending payoff of the story, the protagonist is rewarded for the sacrifice to save the victim. This is how to structure your action story, and this is how you structure the beginning hook. Introduce our characters and setting of the story world. Set the plot in motion and plot questions in the mind of the reader. Begin this by introducing the ordinary world where the protagonist is seen doing something considered as routine. Routine doesn't have to be what the audience considers normal. Make it relevant to the character, as the goal is to show a baseline of them what they will change or fail to change by the end. Demonstrate their flaw or fear to create empathy in the reader. This flaw or fear can be used for significant effect as the thing they will have to overcome. Demonstrate the protagonist want either internal or external. Ones are used to encourage empathy. Make it blatantly clear. Introduce supporting characters as rich and interesting. Give them distinctive names, appearances, mannerisms, emotion, and actions. Use descriptions and details to invoke a sense of their broader culture or background. Don't allow them to be a meaningless victim, flawless hero, or a solely evil antagonist. They should have a clear supporting role for the protagonist. Get their attention with a treacherous, inciting incident, causal or coincidental, that starts the story as fast as possible. Creating a captivating incident and subsequent conflict involves a universal threat most audiences would comprehend and condemn and see as worth fighting. After the initial problem, the protagonist processes new information but refuses to act, possibly wanting to delay a rash decision or being prevented from making such a decision. Make the stakes clear. Stakes in action don't belong in subtext. Next, this is how to structure the middle build of the story. This belongs to the antagonist, the one challenging the protagonist with obstacles. The aim here is to create tension and heighten the stakes for the protagonist. Give some answers, however, leave much unanswered. The protagonist is facing escalating, challenging trials. Showcase how they are simulating and facing newer ambitions. Devise a scene where an event occurs to lead them to accept the quest. The quest acceptance is what starts off the middle build. At the pivot of the story, the protagonist veers away from avoiding the problem by relying on an old pattern of behaviors and thinking to actively facing the issue at hand with a fresh perspective at it. Until now, the protagonist generally has been playing safe, away from the villain, buying for time while they develop a new strategy and develop newfound skills. Crossing story grid terminology with that of the hero's story, the story middle build will hold the second major progressive difficulty of the international story, intersecting the threshold. The third progressive difficulty, test, allies, enemies, the turning point complication, the ordeal, and the crisis, the pinnacle. In an action story without a secondary internal genre, there is no requirement to demonstrate how the character moves. Gradually expose the protagonist to increasing levels of danger to the careless mistakes they create and hate create. Slowly exposing the protagonist to heightened levels of danger because of the terrible mistakes they make or forced into, a rising action is created. A central dilemma must be resolved before the global story can go forward. This is how to structure your ending payoff. Include the climax, the resurrection, and the resolution of the global story. The protagonist tackles the fate of floor fear and undertakes the trial at hand and either triumphs and live or fail to go to their demise in the hands of the antagonist's plan. The climax throws the protagonist into a battle of life or death. The protagonist outwits the antagonist rather than using the inferior physical strength and lives, which makes it a descriptive tale, or the protagonist fails to beat them and die to their own demise. Just as the protagonist seems to be in big trouble, give them sudden courage, ingenuity, a tool, or a revelation subtly foreshadowed very early in the beginning of the story. The ending payoff is where you level down the intensity and action of scenes that answer the primary story questions. If you're writing this series, the resolution can foreshadow new adventures. Now is the elements of the action genre. One element is sentence-led. Writing action scenes call for knowing how to pace the narrative so readers are given action at a sensible and fulfilling momentum. If action patterns are winded with lengthy sentences stuck with verbs and description, this bewilders and overburdens the reader. Short sentences allow the visual to be achieved effectively and rapidly without the need of filler words with no purpose. Another element is active voice. Keeping the narrative voice active retains a consistent momentum to the story. Readers see firsthand how the main characters are visibly working and responding to the environment, which replicates real-time itself, packing more punch into the syntax, which keeps the narrative moving. A much needed element is character goals. Action should have purpose. Characters' beliefs should be influenced on their motivations, their viewpoints, and their previous choices. A protagonist's actions should always impel them towards their primary goal in a course of action related to the plot events at hand. A character's goal should influence their character development, driving them to change and evolve depending on how events unfold in the story. Another essential element is the consequences. Action can be enjoyable to see unfold, but without the element of a possible disastrous outcome or threat, it misses the element that engrosses the reader in the story. Action should make the reader sense the possibility of anything occurring to the heroes or heroines at any given moment without overwhelming them with events and losing its place in the narrative. These are tips to help with writing the story itself. Understand strong action and pace, and actions are significant. Action novels are about a noteworthy action set up to other probable conclusions. Pacing is the speed at which something happens or develops. Remind us that paces in a story can allude to the pace of a standalone scene as well as the momentum at which plot events or characters' larger arcs develop. Action in the writing dilutes when characters are in retrospection longer than in action. There are lengthy dialogue passages where the nemesis overshares their many plans and evil deeds. Sentences are worded over-exaggerated. Snappier sentences allow ease of interpretation so the reader picks up pace. Pace in writing declines when the author wastes his time distributing irrelevant descriptive detail, which is detail that doesn't suggest the potential for action. Scenes are not directed enough. Action insinuates aim. Sentences are too intricate and prolonged. Favor active voice. Writing in active voice is essential for keeping both action and pacing tight. Describe these movements and gestures to increase pace, possibly add a sense of urgency to actions by describing a character's caught in a time-sensitive process. Interrupt actions with other actions. Use strong active verbs with all conclusive description. Use discretion. Ensure there are no patterns which could present to be an authorial crutch or habit. Focus on character movements and gestures that give away their psychological states or intent. Focus on characters' goals and drive the story forward. The story should feel alive and that is always progressing. Scenes without action should still be motivated by the characters' goals, as readers may lose interest if there is an abrupt slump in energy and sagacity to the storyline. Use montages, flashbacks, and other story writing techniques to keep up the pace by delivering necessary information. Keep setting and description relevant to the story. The elements of threat, suspense, and stakes will move your story forward and prepare readers for action and predicaments. Use short sentences to pick up pace. Pacing in writing depends on sentence structure and complexity, word choice, and larger structure, paragraph, scenes, and chapters. Set off chains of cause and effect. Develop chains of cause and effect in events of varying length and intensity. Not see this action. Chains of dramatic events with possible dire outcomes are essential for an engaging action story. Can't filter words and use effective language. Short sentences packed with powerful images that move at a logical pace are useful in conveying strong action sequences that are easy to visualize. Great action and pace requires stripping your writing down to essential elements so that nothing drives except in places it's meant to. Keep actions and moments short. Action stories have many moments of high intensity activity, and it's best they happen in short spurts so that the reader does not get exhausted at high octane events. Humour. Humour ensures that the reader can get a break from the action. Tension breaks humour, and so does humour break tension within the story. Both humour and tension depend on the build and the break, setup and payoff. Both can set up expectations and subvert them and include juxtaposing everyday events and subject matter with the terrifying, absurd, cliche, or all three. Cynical humour works well, especially in darker action stories. It works best when the receiver and giver of the joke are in on the fun. Now to characterization. Even if some characters are dark, all should be sympathetic in some shape or form. They should stand for something and have a consistent or malleable philosophy of the world. Each character should perceive themselves as the hero of their own story. Develop a villain that is complex, authentic, and totally evil. World building. Craft a distinguishable world with a consistent history. Characters and actions and reactions should be believable within the fictional world created. Respect your audience by researching and manually planning your setting. Now to innovation. Even if the story theme is old, the results should be fresh and new. Allow the writers to take your writing where other writers have not ventured in. Excitement must be conveyed. The goal is to entertain. Read thoroughly in the action genre and compare your work to the works of others and the guidelines there. The best way to move to innovation is knowing what writers have done before. Action scenes matter because they deal with a known resource. The reader needs to appreciate how each event, whether action, speech, or new information, affects the resources that matter. Non-action elements must be presented with a clear understanding of how it directly impacts the protagonist's ability to achieve their goal. The idea of central velocity tells a great deal of who a character is to the events of the story and cuts down on tangents necessary to explore them as individuals. When the reader can be made to understand an idea about the human condition as ruling within the story, character work can be done primarily through how characters engage with this rule. Key to a course philosophy is indefinitely what readers should appreciate and dislike in characters and in connecting all characters to one or two shared standards. It's important to understand the central goal of your story. You have to concentrate on how the events, dialogue, and actions in your story affect that goal. Communicate this relationship clearly and often to your readers. Credit to all the sources I used in this video for information. This concludes the end of episode 1, exploring the action genre. I hope this helped you guys, and we will explore the adventure genre in the next episode itself. So I hope you enjoyed this video. Consider subscribing, liking this video, and turning on the notification button bell to get notifications whenever I post a new video. Thank you, Owls, and have a great day.